Welcome, friends, to this meditation and Dhamma session. And we'll begin as usual with half an hour or so of meditation practice. And I'd like to offer some guidance just to get us started. After the meditation, I'd like to offer some words on Dhamma. The topic of today's talk is to try and speak a little bit about Nibbana. What is Nibbana? Specifically to answer a question from last week. And then there'll be some time at the end for questions and answers. So let's begin with meditation. So settling in to this space and allowing ourselves to fully bring the attention to this present experience, right here, right now. Just like wandering in the heat of the day and finding a peaceful, shady spot under a tree beside some cool water. We can sit ourselves down in the cool, fresh breeze. It's just like this, isn't it, when we allow ourselves to stop, to put aside. Let's put aside all the worries and stresses, all the happenings, all the thoughts and plans, all the activities of the day, and simply sit. Breathing deep, allowing the breath to fill the body with peacefulness, relaxation. As we breathe out, letting go of any tension, any stress or strain in the system. Paying attention to the body, paying attention to the breath, feeling the body settling into stillness. Casting the attention around the body and seeing where there's any holding, any tension whatsoever. And we can observe it dissolve, dissolving through the power of our presence, of our kind attention. Soothing, healing, wise attention. Breathing deep, feeling the breath in the chest, in the belly. The gentle rising and falling in these areas of the body, softening, opening, welcoming each breath. Really noticing the movement of the breath, the rhythm of the breath, all the subtle nuances of this natural process. Let nothing else exist for this time. We can Really focus the attention here. Body breathing. Let it be simple. Let it be just this. And anything else that arises, sounds, smells, hot and cold, thoughts of past or future, whatever else arises, let's not give it too much attention. Just notice arising and passing, coming and going, and keep coming back, sitting here in the shade, in the cool, relaxing, breathing deep, enjoying every subtle experience, fully present, alert and attentive. So we can sit together for 20 minutes or so. Wherever you are, we're still a Sangha, we're still a group sitting together, lending our good effort to the Sangha. Welcome again, dear friends, to this Wednesday session. Greetings to all of you, and thanks for all the kind greetings in the chat. Good to see you all. Okay, I'd like to try to say a few words on the topic of what is Nibbana. But first, I'd like to pay homage to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ sanghaṃ namasami. So, at the end of the session last week, there was a question from Shadow of Label, which I didn't really have time to address. And it was something along the lines of, what is beyond Nibbana? And what about the next sunrise? I think there was another part, I can't quite remember now. But what is beyond Nibbana? What about the next sunrise? And so I've been contemplating this question with thanks to Shadow of Label and seeing how I can, address it. It's very interesting, these kind of questions sometimes that we have that are not so easy to answer. And I'd like to speak first of all about a teaching, a sutta, that I came across. There's a question that was asked of the Buddha on a number of occasions. And on this occasion, this question came up for King Pasenadi, who was a disciple of the Buddha. And he was traveling around his kingdom of Kosala, and he was in a small town. It had a name that in translation from the Pali means arched gateway, arched doorway, the place of the arched doorway. And King Pasenadi asked his attendants, where is there a bhikkhu or a wanderer or a mendicant who I can go and see to speak on Dharma? I have a question. And actually there were no monks, male monks in this area. There were no wanderers, but there was a very renowned bhikkhuni called Kema. And so the king was informed about this mendicant who was living in the area. And he went to visit Bhikkhuni Kema. And he asked this question. And the question was, what happens to the Buddha after he dies, when he passes away? And in the tradition of the day, it was very normal to ask a question in 4 different ways. It was a kind of frequent way in which a topic could be very fully explored. A question could be given many kind of dimensions in a way. So the question the king actually asked was, is the Tathagata still existing after death? Or does the Buddha, the Tathagata, cease to exist at death, after death? Or does the Buddha both exist and not exist after death? And the final option, does the Buddha not exist and also, hang on, see if I can get this right. Does he both not exist and exist? Or does he neither exist nor not exist after death? Does he neither exist nor not exist after death? So basically, my sense is this covers all the possibilities. And the nun Kema, just like the Buddha, when he was questioned in this way, couldn't quite answer the question directly. The Buddha would on occasion say, this is not a suitable question. This is not a question to ask. Maybe you can consider asking a different question. On this occasion, the nun Kema didn't say that to King Pasenadi, but she did say, imagine this, great king. If you had some accountants and mathematicians and scientists in your court, and you asked them, please, can you tell me how many grains of sand are to be found in the river Ganges? Would they be able to give you an answer? And King Pasenadi quite quickly came back and said, well, no, I mean, that's just too difficult. There's so many grains of sand in the river Ganges. It would be impossible for them to be able to find out for me. I wouldn't be able to ask them. I wouldn't dream of asking them such a thing. And she went on to say, well, what about if you were to ask them to calculate for you and tell you how many drops of water are to be found in the great ocean? And King Pasenadi again said, no, that wouldn't be a realistic request. I couldn't ask that of them because it would be impossible for them to find out for me. And so in this way, the nun Kema brought King Pasenadi to this place of, well, consider this. This question that you've asked in relation to the Buddha, the Tathagata, the thus come, thus gone, the Tathagata, is not really a suitable question. Because the Buddha, the Tathagata, is like the ocean, vast, impossible to measure, beyond our ability to fully comprehend. Just as it's not possible for us to count all the grains of sand in the river Ganges bed, or all the drops of water in the great oceans. Some questions are not really answerable. The question of what is beyond Nibbana, I would say, is a question that is not really a question that is suitable. It's not a question that is possible to answer because there is nothing beyond Nibbana. What is Nibbana is a question that one could consider, kind of backtracking a little bit. Never mind what's beyond Nibbana. What is Nibbana would be a start, a good start. And so I'm going to see if I can put some words to this question. And, the approach of the Buddha in all his teachings, almost from day one, when he became the Buddha, his approach was an apophatic approach. It was as the Christians would say, it was the via negativa, you know. It was the pointing to what is not the truth, what is not the case, pointing to what we can know in order to direct us towards the ineffable, that which we cannot comprehend mentally, rationally, logically, scientifically even. So this approach, which really mirrored the approach of Hinduism from which the Buddha came, you know, his whole background in India 2,600 years ago was a Hindu country, just as it is today. Hinduism was one of the main ways in which people related to the world and to spirituality. And this neti approach in Hinduism is very similar to the way the Buddha conveyed the Dharma teachings. Not this, not that, neti. And for instance, in the discourse on Not Self, Anatalakkhana Sutta, the second recorded sermon of the Buddha that he gave to his 5 companions. And in the course of teaching them this sutta, they all became arahants, they all became fully liberated. The Buddha was teaching in the Anatalakkhana Sutta, not self-teaching. He was pointing to, you know, the neti approach. Look at what we can experience. We can't experience Nibbana here and now, most of us, most likely. And yet we can practice the Dhamma, we can take up the Buddha's teachings and move in the direction of Nibbana. How do we do that? We work with what we know, we work with what we experience, we learn through our ability to observe reality. And what do we have? We have these bodies, we have these senses, we have this mind. I point to my head, which is interesting. This mind, which is, I could just equally point to my heart, bring the hands to the heart, or I could consider, one could consider this whole body in relation to mind. There's awareness, in short. Awareness of what? Well, we can be aware of feelings, we can be aware of the body, we can be aware of thinking, perceptions, we can be aware of the mood, the emotions as they sort of course through the body, and we can be aware of awareness itself, that which knows, the consciousness that underlies our experiences. And so the Buddha in the Anatalakkhana Sutta is directing us to pay attention to those things that we can know, these experiences that we're having, and see, where can I find anything here that I can call permanent, that I can call mine, me, that has any essence of selfhood in it. This was the direction of the Buddha, to seek in this way, to examine and investigate in this way, to see what is mine, what do I own, what can I identify with, what can I have in this experience, what can I control. And through this investigation, you know, he pointed out that, you know, keep searching and see if there is anything that is permanent or controllable or ownable. And what we notice, what you will notice, is that actually there isn't anything. Every experience is passing, is fleeting. And everything that I'm experiencing has this quality of impersonal. It can't provide me with any sustaining sense of selfhood, because it's so fleeting. The experiences are fleeting and they're not in my control. I get to notice, meditating, that we get to see how there are dhammas arising and passing, but we don't have much opportunity to make things happen. Fundamentally, when we stop and sit, we can see there's a stream of dhammas, there's a stream of experiences that are just happening. And when we stop trying to delude ourselves into thinking that we're in control here, and just stop and put the world aside and bring the attention into the body and bring the attention to this mind, we get to realize slowly but surely that there is actually no agency here. There is no control. There is no driver of the vehicle. There's actually something like, as one nun famously said in the Pali Canon, in the verses in Samyutta Nikaya, she said, Vajira, she said, it's just like a chariot. This experience of mind and body, it's just like a chariot made up of all these different parts, materials, put together in such a way that we call it chariot, or nowadays we could say car. The tires, the windscreen, the body, the engine, and so forth. All these parts are put in the right places and kind of connected together, and we get in and we can drive it and we call it a car. But actually, when we start to investigate Dhamma, when we start to meditate in the same way as one would look at a car and investigating what is car, one could kind of make a list of all these different parts, and one could separate them all out and see that very clearly that, each part does not make a car. A car is something that you label this thing that's an amalgamation of all these different parts put together in a certain way. In the same way with the mind and body, we get to see, don't we? We get to really experience how this mind and body is an amalgamation of all these different aspects, body, all its different parts, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, memories, awareness itself. They're all different dhammas, and you put them all together and one can imagine there's this thing that has a life and that has a history and that has a future to worry about. But of course, it's just like the car. It's something that can be dismantled, and it's good to dismantle this thing because we can start to get closer to the truth of the way things are. And so in this Anatalakkhana Sutta, the Buddha is encouraging the monks, to see that this experience, moment to moment, is constantly changing. All these different components are to be seen separately, arising and passing. And we can separate them out and see how impermanent they are. And in seeing that, how things arise and pass, dhammas arise and pass, constantly changing, then we can also appreciate that it's impossible to call any particular part of this or moment of this me or mine or myself. And so the whole edifice can start to crumble, can start to topple, can start to deconstruct itself. This is freedom. This is insight. This is inexorably leading us towards Nibbana. There's a beautiful simile in Samyutta Nikaya where the Buddha's again trying to describe how is this state of Nibbana, of freedom from suffering, of non-reactivity, of absolute unshakability? How is this? What is this state? And he said, it's like, imagine you have a house with a roof and 4 walls and a floor, and there are windows in the east, the north, and the south sides, and the sun is rising outside, and you can imagine the light of the sun coming in the eastern window of this structure, this house. And the Buddha asked the monks, well, where would the light hit? Where would it shine? And they said, well, it would shine on the west wall of the house. And he said, yes. And what if the west wall was not there, did not exist? And they said, well, it would shine on the floor of the house. And what if the floor of the house did not exist? They said, well, it would shine on the water or the earth. And the Buddha said, well, what if they didn't exist either? Where would the light shine? Where would the light hit? These are the kind of answers that the Buddha would give to try to help us to appreciate what is this state, the state that is free from all greed, hatred, delusion. He would describe it sometimes as like a flame of a candle, dependent upon, of course, the wax. And what happens to the flame when the wax is used up? There's no wax left. And the flame goes out. What happens to that flame? Where does it go? Can you find it anywhere? This was another way in which the Buddha answered this question of where does the Buddha go after he passes away. So, it's very difficult for us to put into words this understanding of Nibbana, the goal of the spiritual life, complete freedom from suffering. It's very difficult to put into words, and the Buddha didn't actually spend a lot of his time trying to describe or explain Nibbana. He spent so much more of his time actually helping people to let go of suffering and move in the direction of Nibbana. And, it's like the handful of leaves simile, where the Buddha was really telling us that there's this whole forest of leaves. This is how much I know, but this handful of leaves that I pick up in my hand here, this is how much I'm going to actually talk about. This is how much is actually useful. What is the handful of leaves that the Buddha spent most of his time sharing and elucidating for us? It was suffering and the way out of suffering. And so we don't have a lot of teachings, direct teachings on Nibbana, the goal of the spiritual life. But there are a few. There are a few places in the Pali Canon where the Buddha speaks about Nibbana, and he gives some descriptions for us. He describes it as the far shore, as the deathless, the ageless, the unborn, the unconditioned, the exhaustion of craving, the marvelous, safety, which interestingly is the same word, kema, as the name of the nun who was teaching King Pasenadi in the sutta I was describing earlier. The unshakable, freedom from bondage, liberation. These are all ways in which Nibbana is described in the Pali Canon, and many more ways also. There's a lovely teaching in the Sutta Nipata where the Buddha is questioned. There's a whole group of young Brahmins who came to see the Buddha, and they all asked him marvelous questions. And one of them, called Kappa, which actually means eon in Pali, like an immeasurable, vast period of time. Anyway, Kappa asked the Buddha a very poignant question. He gave a simile in his question. He said, just like a river that's flooding, the current is very strong and it's sweeping everything away. So is, for us humans, so is aging, so is death, like this river that's sweeping us away. How can we find an island, a place of safety in this flood? And the Buddha replied, yes, you can. There is a place of safety. There is an island where one can be free from aging and death. And he said it's a place of not having anything, akinchana, anadana, not taking anything. This is the place where you can find refuge, not having anything, not taking anything, not being anything. This is the practice for us. This is the path. It's leading us toward letting go of anything and everything that we identify with, that we make something of, that we hold to in any way. To let go. As Ajahn Chah said, we let go a little bit, we have a little bit of peace. We let go a lot, we have a lot of peace. If we let go entirely, then we can experience unshakable peace. This is Nibbana. So it's letting go. In a number of places in the suttas, the Buddha told us, whatever you think is the case, whatever you think is real, whatever you think is true, whatever you think is, the truth, the reality is always other than that. Again, this neti approach. It's like we're kind of tunneling through samsara. And every spadeful of earth that we kind of have to shovel out of the way in order to tunnel through is another experience that is to be let go of, just shoved behind us, put behind us. Not this, not that. Whatever we think, the truth is always other than that. This is so helpful as a simple and short, pithy teaching from the Buddha, just to remind us that our practice is about undoing, unbinding. The word Nibbana, one way of translating it is no bana knots, no knots, untying, to be able to keep letting go, to keep dismantling the edifices, the structures that the mind has created over many, many, many past experiences of this kind of compulsion through ignorance to bring things together, to make things, to create, to identify with, to own and to suffer with. Whatever we make mine, we lose, because because we can't own anything. So we have to experience loss for everything that we hold to, for everything that we feel we gain. There will be loss, and it's a very simple equation. As much as we hold on, that much we have to suffer. As much as we make mine, that much we have to lose. As much as we hold things dear, that much grief we have to experience. So, this is not to, turn us into kind of indifferent, people who turn away from the world and shun any kind of experiences. Not at all. It's through experience that we can actually learn about reality and learn how to chart our course, to be able to sail smoothly across this ocean of Dharma. And so this question, what is beyond Nibbana? There is nothing beyond Nibbana. What is Nibbana? And what about the next sunrise? And I found this a very good koan for me. A good question. What about the future, essentially? What about future pleasures? Many people, when they come across the Buddha's teachings, and they have a wrong grasp of the teachings on the goal of spiritual practice, the teachings around the concept of Nibbana, they can get quite upset. And they'll say things like, and it may have occurred to you, what about all the people that I love? What happens to them if I become an arahant, if I become enlightened? What happens to all these relationships that mean so much to me? And what about the future? And, I think these are really good questions because they're like koans for us. We can unpack these questions. We can really explore what is the state of mind? What is actually happening to produce this question? Where's this question coming from? And we can tease out and see, is there any desire, wanting in this question? Is there anything underlying this concern that I have for the future? Is there something of fear or wanting or not wanting? Is there something that I'm holding on to here? Let me investigate that. Let me investigate my thoughts of the future. Let me consider what's happening when the mind moves into the future. What's happening in the body? How does it feel? Where does it take me? And, many of these questions, we can seek answers outside of ourselves, and we can have good, Dharma discussions about these things. But I think for most of us, most of the time, the best way to answer such questions is to meditate and to investigate and to see what happens to these thoughts and concerns when we shine the light of mindfulness on these questions, on these states of mind. And we can see that the questions arise and pass. And the answers are often not kind of on that verbal, rational, mental level, are they? That the answers come to us in a more kind of profound and deep and penetrating way as we practice. And we can start to recognize that, the mind that moves into the future is a mind of suffering. And there's always some wanting or not wanting there. And when I really look at that, I can actually see that the wanting and not wanting have a life. They arise and then they pass away. And I can watch the whole process. And I can see the beginning of that thought, the middle of that thought, and then I can see the end of such thoughts. And when those thoughts come to cease, what's left? What's left then? So, I guess what I'm pointing to is that in our experience, we can appreciate that the Buddha was teaching a spiritual path that takes us all the way to this end goal, this goal of Nibbana, freedom from all suffering, freedom from all ignorance, from all desire, from all aversion. And it's a given. If we keep practicing, slowly but surely, we're moving in that direction. But also, even as we're practicing day to day, having the experiences that we have, noticing the arising and passing of Dhammas, we can experience cessation. We can experience things coming to an end. And it's good to notice that. It's good to notice when a thought, an obsession, a question, a feeling, an emotion, a worry, a concept, a view, we can really benefit by noticing when these things come to an end and the space that's left, what's left when they've ceased. This is not out of our reach at all. This is something worth paying attention to notice the third noble truth. The first noble truth, there's suffering, there's experience. The second noble truth, the reason we suffer because of wanting and not wanting, because of reactivity, because of thoughts of past and future, because of restlessness, because of not being fully present. And the third noble truth, there is an end to all of this struggle. There is an end to desire. We simply have to let go. Neti, not this, not that. Discard, put aside. Don't hold on to anything at all, any kind of experience whatsoever. And as we cultivate this attitude of letting go, then we can start to really notice things arising and passing away, cessation. Oh, and it's beautiful, it's blissful, it's relief, it's release. It's like the tree I was talking about in the guided meditation, under which we can rest in the shade by the cool pond, the still water. There is such peace in letting go. There is such peace to be found in allowing things to cease. And so we can experience a taste, a hint, we can glimpse Nibbana, this cooling. Another meaning of the word Nibbana is to cool. When a dish has been cooked and it's left out to cool down, the word is, it's Nibbana. It's allowed to Nibbana. It's Nibbanaing. Nibbana is like a verb in this case. It means cooling down. And we can experience the cooling down as we cultivate the letting go. We relinquish, we put aside, experience after experience, recognizing that this isn't it. This isn't the end goal of the practice. And, it's easy to allow difficult, painful, unpleasant experiences to pass, to not hold on to them, to let them cease in their own time. That's not so difficult, although we do tend to hold on to our suffering too, our pain as well. But it's easier to let go of this side of experience than it is to relinquish pleasure, bliss, the bliss of meditation when things are so peaceful, so calm, so focused, so one-pointed. But even this, again and again, the Buddha would say, whatever experiences you have, recognize that if there's an experience happening, then it's not this. This is not the ultimate goal. This is not Nibbana. This is a milestone, perhaps. This is maybe something one can gain insight around. But whatever experiences we have, can we cultivate an attitude of letting go, of moving through, of being willing to bring in the understanding, as I was speaking about last week, of change, impermanence. Let's see how long this lasts. Remembering that the Buddha said, whatever I think is real in this moment, the truth is always other than this, other than this. Can I move forward on the path? And so we cultivate this beautiful enlightenment factor of investigation of Dhamma. And just keep practicing not to get snagged up in anything, in any state, in any mind state, in any view, in any sense of having any idea whatsoever about what is Dhamma. The Buddha said even the raft of Dhamma is like a raft that we put together. He gave this beautiful simile, didn't he? You put this raft together, use it to paddle across to the other shore, to the far shore, to Nibbana. And when you get there, even this raft is to be let go of. So what I'm really pointing to here is that whatever we think is the path, whatever we understand of the Buddha's teachings, whatever sense of direction we have, that's great. And let's use it and let's keep going. But let's remember that the truth is always other than that, and humbly open to learning, to being a beginner, start afresh every moment, just really with an open heart and open gaze. And then we can truly be letting go of past conceptions, letting go of imagination, letting go of thinking that we know the way, and opening to the way things really are. So I hope this is a kind of encouragement and also certainly an attempt to say a few words on this topic of Nibbana, which I hope in some way has met the question of last week. So I think I'll conclude here, Iwan, and open up for any questions and comments. So I'm looking at the chat now. Hello, everyone. Sadhu, sadhu. Okay, Japalsin, thank you. Japalsin's asking, Aya, can we move in and out of Nibbana? Thank you, Japalsin. Yeah, the Buddha described how he would, when he could, when the conditions allowed him to do so, then he would meditate and simply let go of even the jhana, even the most peaceful and sublime states of mind. And he would dwell, he would rest in the signless, in the perfect, unshakable peace of Nibbana. And one can only imagine that this was a very peaceful abiding that gave, rest in a life that was incredibly full and you could say busy, in the sense that the Buddha was tirelessly, teaching people, beings in all different planes of existence, throughout his life, from the time that he became the Buddha at the age of 35, right up until old age. And he died at a really ripe old age for those days, 80, as we know. So 45 years of giving and sharing, and often being surrounded by people, and training monks and nuns, and teaching huge numbers of people from all over the area of northern India and Nepal, all the way from kind of north of Delhi, all the way through to almost on the way to Calcutta. Huge area, walking on foot, teaching, speaking on Dharma. And so when he had an opportunity, he would meditate and let it all go. And anyone who's fully liberated has the experience of Nibbana. And my understanding is that it's something that would be accessible to such a person. And those who have attained the fruits of practice, such as stream entry, sotapanna, once returners, sakadagami, non-returners, anagami, these different stages of liberation leading towards the complete liberation of an arahant. All these people have had an experience of Nibbana. And I'm not sure, but my sense is that the possibility of experiencing the signless, the unshakable peace of Nibbana would be possible for such people, if the causes and conditions allowed. And for the rest of us, we may not have the opportunity to understand fully through experience the peace of Nibbana. We've not had even a glimpse of that until we're stream enterers. But we can understand and apply, this understanding, like to a degree. Like as I said, we understand this much. There will be more. There's always more to learn. And we can always look back and see how, well, I thought I understood then, but actually I didn't really have a clue. We can always have these experiences if we're on the spiritual path. This is a good thing, that we can have the opportunity to look back and realize how much we have gained, how much we have, in a way, grown on the path. We have understood more deeply, more fully the Dhamma. Like the ocean, we can immerse ourselves, bit by bit. And so, even if we haven't understood Nibbana through experiencing it, we can appreciate the benefits of letting go. We can appreciate the experience of cessation when, say, afflictive emotion, a difficult emotion, such as anger, is present, and I'm willing to sit, to be still, not to react, not to say or do anything in anger, to boil and bubble inside and allow the anger to be present. Breathing it in, breathing it out, and just staying steadily, patiently with it. We can have these kind of experiences where the anger's there and then it kind of crescendos, there's a peak, burning moment, and then we can start to notice over time that even the strongest, most painful emotions will kind of then start to dissipate. And eventually we might even notice as we sit that, oh, it's just not happening anymore. Something else is happening. The anger is gone. And so to notice cessation, it gives us a taste, just a hint of the peace that is possible when dhammas cease. And so we can all, I think, through practice, relate to this and notice these little tastes of freedom, all along the way. If we're willing to let go, renounce reactivity, let go of our liking and disliking through observing it fully and not acting upon these impulses, these movements, away from what's real. Movement towards something, movement away from something is to be in suffering, is to be out of reality, is to have an opportunity to let go and come back to peaceful abiding. So we can have these little tastes of Nibbana, little mini Nibbanas. They're not really Nibbana, but we may be having just a kind of experience of something in that way of cooling down, untying the knots, moving through obstructions. So thank you, Japal Sin. In this way, I think we could say we all have the opportunity to move in and out of peace. And let's just, make much of peace when there is peace. When the hindrances are not present, the mind is peaceful, the mind is still. Let's make much of that. And when that's not the case for us, let's remember that it is a possibility and that suffering is optional. And we can let go very quickly if we apply mindfulness to any situation. Thank you, Japal Sin. Okay. So I'm a bit slow here. Okay. Forgive me if I'm mistaken. Thank you, Kristen. I thought Bhikkhu Analayo argued that light-based analogies are not used by the Buddha, hence his preference to use awakening instead of enlightenment for Nibbana. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah. I think some people do use enlightenment and the simile of the sunbeam, that doesn't land anywhere if all the structures are removed. It is from the Buddha, but I can appreciate, there are so many great scholars, and Bhikkhu Analayo is certainly really a shining light, of erudition in the Buddhist world. And he's bringing so much, I dare I say, to light for us of the Buddha's teachings. And, studying what are the earliest teachings, what are later additions, and how to really understand these teachings deeply. So I think his work is just awesome. And whatever he says, I'm sure there's very good reasons and a lot of interesting learning to be had from investigating in that way. Just want to look again. he uses awakening. Yeah, that's really a very helpful translation for Nibbana, or for the goal of the path. And the word Buddha, after all, means simply awake. So I think it's a very apt translation. And, you know, we can consider that we're waking up from delusion, waking up to reality. We're coming out of the dream, you know, and it's these kind of ways of considering this process of spiritual practice and its goal. It's really helpful to have many different translations, actually, and see what works for you, and consider all the options and contemplate these words, because this is what we have. We have the English language, or whatever language you speak. We need to use our own languages to try to understand the Dharma. But it's also really good, I must say, to go back to the Pali and to learn Pali, even just word by word, and investigate the Pali meanings, because there's often a great richness. And just as in this case, there are many different ways of translating these beautiful words. And it's good to consider all the options. Thank you, Kristen. Okay. Japalsin says, there's no light and there's no flame because there's no self. Thank you, Japalsin, for that. Yeah, very good comment. Okay. Oh, there's a sharing here about some good info. Video on the YouTube channel, Doug's Dharma, about Bhante Analios and Bhante Bodhi's views on this. So that's a thank you for that, Anthony. Something for people to, if you want to look at the translations and discussion around the different English words for Nibbana, that will be a good place to look. Excellent. Okay, Anthony, again, do you use neti in meditation? Also, I like nibbanaing as a word. Yeah, nibbanaing is good, isn't it? Just chill, just cool down, just let go. That's nibbanaing. And neti, yes, I certainly do use that in meditation, in the sense, often for me, the most valuable way to consider this, not that approach for me, is when I'm getting caught up in any kind of identification. So the sense of self, I've noticed, always has to be present for me to suffer. If there's no self, there's no suffering. It's very interesting how simple that is as a reality for us. And so if I notice that there's some discomfort in the heart or mind, there'll be somebody in there. There'll be a sense of self. And so I like to seek that and investigate that sense of holding to anything at all, and remind myself, not this. No, this is not me. This is not mine. This is not myself. And the letting go, you know, we can give a little sort of, just a small kind of hint to the mind, a small reminder is often all that is required, isn't it? And then we can allow things to dissolve, to fade away, you know. Thank you, Anthony. Okay. Thanks, Bhavani. Namaste. Knowing Nibbana, how not to fall into complacency towards worldly responsibilities, Aya. Thank you. Yeah. This is a perennial question, isn't it, for us? There is the path, there is the practice. We could certainly spend our entire time practicing for Nibbana, practicing letting go, developing insight, developing samadhi. You know, and then there's life. And if we're not monks and nuns, if we've chosen to live a lay life, then inevitably, there'll be other things that take time and energy, such as work and family and responsibilities galore. And it's a challenge, for sure, but it's certainly possible to use all our circumstances, situations that we're in, the ways in which we spend our day, to actually develop spiritual qualities, powers, and particularly to develop mindfulness. It's not impossible. Indeed, we can, if we really allow our mindfulness, right effort, the cultivation of good qualities to be at the forefront of our lives, then whatever we're doing, wherever we are, whatever our situation, it can become path. It can be path for us. And I think this is the call for all of us to, can you plow everything that you have and everything that you are and everything that you do into this practice and allow the, dare I say, light of awareness to kind of permeate all experience, and in this way allow wisdom to arise. Can we do this? We can. It can be challenging, and I really wish you well with the practice. Okay, last one. Thank you, Andre. What is the relationship, if any, between cultivating the 5 precepts and how they aid individuals in attaining Nibbana? Thank you, Andre. This is a lovely way for us to finish, because absolutely essential to cultivate the Eightfold Path. So beautifully laid out for us by the Buddha, so balanced. You know, just like the Dharma wheel with the 8 spokes, you know, all of them equal, all of them needed, all of them aiding and abetting one another. So all these qualities are necessary for us, actually, if we want to walk the path. And so we can observe, you know, in our own lives, you know, what strengths are present and what weaknesses are present, and see if we can balance. So bringing up the weak points and paying attention to develop the good qualities that we need, and to, you know, acknowledge the strengths and allow them to nourish and support other aspects of our lives. So for instance, if I'm a really kind of good meditator, if I'm able to meditate, if I like to meditate, I enjoy sitting, but actually I'm quite unkind to the people around me, then I can simply be aware that I have a strength of mindfulness and I have a weakness in terms of sila. So I need to focus on that. I need to work towards turning things around so that I develop a heart of loving kindness and I can avoid hurting or harming those around me. That's just one example. But in this case, I'm very glad that you bring in the precepts and sila for us, because this is the foundation of our practice. This is the ground that we stand on. Without virtue, without harmlessness, without a really profound orientation towards avoiding harm and thereby doing good, we can't really develop at all along the path of practice. It's simply not possible, because there'll be too much agitation, too much remorse, too much suffering in the heart and mind. So we know very well that to live a righteous life is to have a happy heart and a peaceful mind. And this is the beginning point for practice, for liberation. So I think that's a really wonderful note to end on. and wish you all well with your polishing of the precepts and your practice generally. And thank you so much for your kind attention today. All good wishes.